Today's subject is plumbing. Yay. Well, getting fresh water it's been a problem for people forever, as long as there's been people. And for the bulk of our history, we've just moved closer to the river. But the river's a quarter of a mile that way, and I need some fresh water, so now we get to benefit from the technological advancements of our predecessors. And so what we do now is we just drill a hole in the ground and suck water straight from there. This piece of interesting and fascinating technology can help us accomplish that. So in this video, I'll talk a little bit about this gizmo, how it works, and its constituent parts. This one is still a work in progress. I'm building it as we speak. So before I get into what I've learned about what all these parts do, let's go look at the problem itself and why I'm doing this. This is to a well system. The thing of relevance here is this blue tank. This is a pressure tank. I'll return to that. First, let's look at this. This electricity line, well, wait. This is the thing that I'm building in the garage. And this piece of wiring goes back to that hole along with this piece of hose. Those two things go all the way out over the hill to the pump itself. That's where the water comes in, and this is where the electricity goes to the pump. Electricity goes to this gray box, which is a switch. We will return to that. But first, let's talk about the symptoms. This thing is called a pressure tank. Inside of this thing, there's a balloon or a diaphragm or I don't know what you want to call it, but it separates this into two parts. One part is compressed air, and one part is water that comes in from the pump. When this switch sends a signal to turn the pump on, the pump runs until this switch receives enough pressure to push the spring up enough to flip the switch. But back to the tank. As water builds in this thing, and thus pressure, it pushes on this air balloon, which is compressed air. So what it does is it stores up energy in the form of compressed air, in the form of pressure. So that way, when you run a faucet and water goes out, this compressed air balloon is pushing on it to give your system pressure. And in doing so, then the pump doesn't have to run every time you turn on the spigot. I hope I explained that clearly enough. I'm not a plumber, as you might have guessed. But just to review, this is the electricity going to the well. This is the water coming from the well. It goes into this. This is a sediment, a valve, or let stuff off or let it out or drain it. This is a pressure gauge. Focus, please. Yeah, you can see it's about due to be changed. And this goes into the tank. So, back in that tank, the symptom was that when I would look inside there, I'll give you a better view, wait a second. We noticed some water here, and it was all misty, and it was spraying out a stream of mist. The whole thing was clogged with mist in there. So presumably there was a little tiny hole somewhere up inside the tank. Luckily it stopped, and that gives me some breathing room, some water while I wait. It probably just clogged with rust. But at first I flipped the breaker to turn off the well system, and while I got all the parts, I ordered them from the internet and everything. And it stopped leaking, so I have some time, thankfully. So this is electricity back to the breaker box. This is the house plumbing, and this is just a shut-off valve. So this is where all the water in my house goes to. This J channel is just to collect the water into this goofy temporary plumbing system that I put on. Now back to the garage to build this gizmo, and I want to replace it today. I'm replacing it with a 4060. That means it turns on when the pressure drops to 40 and it stops running at 60. And just to get this number out there, This is a 20-gallon tank, and it comes pre-charged, that is with pressurized air. Here's the fitting, it's just an air fitting. It comes pre-charged at 38. Why 38? Because it's set up for a 40-60 and it's supposed to be 2 pounds less than the lowest number. Okay, so here's my new empty tank. Now, I already have the union set up. I'll show this to you right now. If you buy one of these replacement tees, get one of the ones with the union on it, just because it makes it easier. Most of them actually don't have the union. That's this thing. And that'll make it harder to attach. But I have an important point to make. You can test your pressure in your tank just with a regular air fitting to make sure that it's 2 pounds less than your startup, your lower number. In this case, it's 40. But make sure that your tank is empty when you do that, because when water pressure builds in this, it changes the compressed air pressure inside the tank. So again, if you want to test that number, make sure that the tank has been drained. Now back to this mess, you can see there's no union here, but this is just copper, and the plumber had to solder that in place, which might actually be easier than a straight tee with no union. My new setup is also going to make use of a union here, which will pull the CPVC nice and tight against my new brass. And to my fellow non-plumbers out there, you don't have to put Teflon tape or pipe dope on threads for a union, because it's not the tight threads that seal in this case. It's the pressure, and it smashes against this O-ring instead. Unions are kind of a cool development if you think about them. You know, I walked by this and thought about it, and a union is kind of like a jar. If you look, it's not the threads that seal this. The threads would leak. It's that rubber gasket thing that the threads cause to become really tight to the jar. I guess by analogy, a union is the same thing. Believe it or not, I don't own a test light or a multimeter, so the first thing that I'm going to do is rig up a test light so that I can see if this is off when I turn the breaker off. So of course, disclaimer, don't do anything I do, ever. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just fumbling through this for your entertainment. And just for my reference, this is black coming in from the breaker. This is black going out to the pump. This is white going out to the pump. And this is white coming in from the breaker box. Both are grounded. So let's make a peripherally related diversion. This is for a light bulb. If you're bored because this is off topic, then skip it. I'm going to make a test light. I don't have a multimeter or a test light. I don't know why. I've been meaning to... Well, you know, I'm meaning to do a lot of things. Okay, so what was my thought? Oh yeah, the Yangtze River. You want to talk about an engineering challenge there. It's also kind of a shame. So what it is, it's the Three Gorges Dam. Hold on a second. It's an enormous dam in China on a tremendously historically important river. And since cultures have traditionally, as I was saying, settled and developed right there alongside of a river, the Yangtze River is just flooded, pun intended, flooded with archaeological stuff. And it's really a shame that when they flooded it, this was quite a few years ago now, but when they flooded it, it just covered over so much that we'll likely never know. Where I used to live, there was a... Yeah, these are worn out. I have to use 14 and then 12. where I used to live, there, where we would get our water from, was a pretty big reservoir. And I remember some of the older inhabitants of the area telling me about what it was like before it was flooded, because it was man-made. And I always thought that was so interesting, that there were underwater ruins of early, well, I don't want to say settlers, maybe not that far back, but here in the United States, our history isn't that old. So what I would consider ruins are really from only 100 or 200 years ago. Before that, there were only indigenous peoples here, which is kind of neat. Kind of makes Europe interesting that it has such a rich old history in contrast. But it also makes it interesting here that it feels, our history, what is available to us, feels more real in a way. So the plan is to get these in there, but I'm going to flatten them first to make them a little easier to solder. So to the vise. PSI. Interesting idea. This hammer flattens it that much with a single blow. But if I use a punch instead, the same single blow, concentrated, will flatten it much more, because we're increasing the pressure per square inch. I know, you already knew that. It's just sandpaper, 220 grit. Does that answer the question? What does it do? I have no idea how it works, but for whatever reason, the solder moves to it. So if you want to have a successful soldering, use it. The other trick to solder, and I am no expert, believe you me, but the other trick that I can definitely say with some authority is that it follows the heat. Always remember that. Solder follows the heat. So if this seems excessive to you, I will be the first to admit to you that it is. But I've encountered this problem often enough that I've been meaning to make a test light like this for a long time now. Ooh, wow. Probably don't even need to solder it. A soldering iron will likely not have enough heat to get that, and a soldering gun I don't want to waste my time with. Being stubborn, have propane. There are topics and videos where it's appropriate for me to release something that's well researched. And then there are other topics like making a test light where I can just fly by the seat of my pants and it really doesn't matter. It adds to the kind of informal charm that this channel was supposed to have. And there's a good reason for that. Let's be honest. Most of our solutions to our problems are tentative, they're temporary, they're what works for now. So I think when I was younger, I tried to take more of a this will last forever approach, but I think that was just, I was naive and I didn't understand the transient nature of reality. Everything is temporary, so there's no point in fighting it. So if it's good enough for now, it's good enough in general. Let's go test this out. Don't try this at home, kids. Ooh, it's a new one. It's tight. All right, it worked, and for reasons of safety, I'm not going to show you again. What I did was I connected the leads to the two outermost connections, and that's to test this line right here. What I got was the bulb was way brighter than what it was in a regular outlet. Okay, breaker has been flipped. My left hand is behind my back. And it's clearly off. That makes me a little more comfortable. Definitely a little bit of rust in there. I have the laundry tub faucet open as well. So I'll just let this drain for a little bit. And I'm sorry, but the video has to take a back seat because this is more important. I have to get it done. So wish me luck, and I'll pick back up with you after I have this completed. Well, that sure was fun. I didn't finish until probably 9 o'clock last night, and it's the next morning, and I woke up to that little drop there. That's just some plumbing stuff. With the exception of this, everything else is functioning as it should. I've run it through several cycles and it works fine. If I were asked to describe the thing that I found most surprising, it would be how tight you have to put these fittings on. I really didn't know that brass went on that tightly. In fact, this really surprises me. So let me address this, and now that I have some time, I'll explain what all this stuff is. Here's my new wiring setup. This was a bit of a disappointment because one of these was actually stripped out. They had tightened it on from the factory so tight that it stripped out one of the screws. But I had to repair it instead because I wasn't going to send it back. The gauge is working as advertised. It kicks on at 40 and it stops just below 60. I put some plastic here just to make it kind of a barrier so that it doesn't rust as quickly, and I also have it setting up on some pieces of rubber. I had a leak in there originally, so I had to take it back off and tighten that again. I can't say enough, I can't express enough how surprised I was by how tight you have to put everything on. Okay, so this is a shutoff valve. It just shuts off the house water. That's easy enough. This is a union which attaches brass to CPVC. This was the thing that I was most concerned about it leaking, just because I don't trust this stuff. I would prefer to use PEX or copper, but this is what I had. What it is there's a little fitting inside that it's a female fitting that glues to this, and then this piece of copper pulls all of that tight into a gasket, into a rubber O-ring that tightens against the brass. And again, there's the other union in the back. And having done this, I'm not sure that I would recommend the union as much as I had originally thought. Having built a lot of this right here in place maybe the union isn't as important as I thought, and it was tough to get it not to leak. You really have to tighten that one as well. This valve is the lowest point in the system, so it's the easiest way to drain the entire thing. I think they call it a sediment, I don't know. This, as you can see if you look real close, is it's a pressure burst. So if this system goes to 100 psi, this bursts off. It's a safety measure. This upright nipple here is threaded on both top and bottom, and this connects to the pressure switch so that when the pressure is significant enough, the spring causes the switch to go, it tells the pump to turn on or off. Here's the box of old parts. I'm trying to salvage some of it, but it's mostly garbage. But I figured you would be interested to take a quick peek at how this thing operates. So this is the same model, and I've removed the screws from underneath, and now look what's inside. There's a balloon in here. This is rubber, and pressurized water presses against it and lifts this up in cases of high pressure, which forces this thing to activate. It's a head scratcher. And to be honest, looking at its connections and all of its mechanical parts, it would be good for another lifetime if it weren't for this diaphragm. Rubber just doesn't last forever. Oh, one other thing that I should mention, because this is being shot way after the fact. This was completely clogged with sediment all the way up. I mean, I really cleaned it. In fact, even the T was clogged almost shut, especially on this end. I can't even believe that it was operating. It was operating through a pinhole. And most of this stuff is garbage. The valve is broken. This is fried. But I was able to restore this. It's still good. But I wouldn't use it on anything that mattered. Okay, jump back now. Why did I use this 3/4 nipple as opposed to a 1-inch one? Because that's how I built it at the hardware store, and because plumbing is not my first trade, it would have been nice to simplify and just keep this all 1-inch all the way through, but that's not how it worked out. So instead I used what's called a bushing, and I reduced it to 3/4 and then brought it back up to 1-inch again. Oh well, so go the days of our lives. And now this fitting here, it inserts into that what looks like ABS, but I don't think it is. I would guess that it's polyethylene, but I'm not sure. This, however, is most likely polyethylene. I put these hose clamps on in alternating positions just so that it doesn't constrict the pipe too much in one position. It's also worth noting that I used a heat gun on this to take it on and off. I made sure this was nice and warm so that when I pressed this on, it would conform to that shape. This is old and rigid, and I didn't want to risk cracking it, so heat helped soften. I've drained the system again, and I put a block underneath the T to support it when I'm wrenching on it. I really don't like doing that, but I don't have a choice. Hopefully this is the last time. I'm still turning. I decided to make it even tighter by adding one full rotation to be split between all of these. Almost there, but I'm trying to be careful. I don't want to break it. I'm so close to the finish line. Once this tank has water in it, it won't be so easy to move. Okay, final adjustments. It's straight looking. This valve goes on. This one is closed. And now, wait here, cross your fingers, watch, and I'll go flip the breaker. Almost to 60. No drops yet. Could it be? Could I have done it? I think I have a success. Yes! Wow. Okay, I hope something in this was useful to you. See you on the next topic. Wait, two last things that I want to squeeze into this video. Cost and testing your own tank. So, if you suspect that your tank is bad, this is just an air valve. And your step one should be to depress this. If air comes out, then it's probably still intact. If it squirts water out, well, then your balloon inside has failed. If for some reason that doesn't work, give it a shove. If it's really heavy, like if it weighs a ton, then it's filled with water and the balloon has failed. As for this thing, this would be the compressed air chamber. Might make something out of that. It's kind of neat. When we look down in it, it seems to be a thick rubber, and it's held in place by a stainless steel ring right here, and the entire inside seems to be greased with maybe a anti-rust sort of thing. I don't know how well you can make this out, but there is a faint impression on the rubber of a circle. So when this rubber is inflated all the way up, it presses on the bottom of that dome, the lower dome. Thus, essentially what it creates is a high pressure water balloon here and a section of air that's really well compressed. So how did it fail? I can't be sure how it failed given the state of it. It does seem as though it developed a weak spot right here, and that could have just been a flaw in this elbow, but it may have been a design flaw as well. These have been replaced with stainless, so if you're in the market for a new tank, if you buy this model, it will have a stainless elbow. But if you're buying a different brand, I would recommend the stainless elbow. Aside from that, the rest of it seems really well intact, and you can tell that it has some pretty sturdy construction. It's only been affected by superficial rust. And cost. The tank itself, let's call it around $220 online. The kit, about another $100, and that came with this big valve. So let's say another less than $80 for all the bushings and fittings and everything. So all told, as a DIY project, this is about $400, and that's a heavy conservative estimate. Okay, see you later.